Today we are honored to welcome Andrew Keaveney to the show today. I'm very happy to have him on. He is very expert in meditation, breathwork, everything, the mind really. And as we were just talking about, meditation is such a valuable skill, and learning how to be skillful at it can change our lives. Just being able to stay focused in the world of distractions. This man right here really knows how to do that. He's helped so many different people, and I'm very excited to have him on to share his knowledge and expertise with us today. So, how you doing, man?
Good, Anthony. Glad to be on this show and interact with you and the audience.
Absolutely. So, I'm very interested to hear your story and how you got into meditation, breath work, and how you're helping people today.
Life has its own circuitous way of taking us from one place to another. I was in Memphis, Tennessee, which is maybe the last place you would imagine discovering meditation. It was for me. I got interested, looked around, couldn't really find anything. And so it was a used bookstore, it was a library. I started meditating with books and got enough of a taste for it that I was hooked. So I started practicing on my own, eventually moved out west, met some teachers and kept exploring and experimenting. Did that for about 5-6 years. All that took me to a program, Gurudev, he's my main teacher. And then I said, let me dive in. I went straight for it, moved to India for a few years to really go in deep. And that was my unexpected path from, the South to India and then back here to share this back home.
Awesome. So it sounds like all your travels, you kind of came up some certain teachers that kind of showed you the path. Is that right?
Yeah, I learned bits here and there, experimented. I'm a big believer in trial and error and, seeing if something works for you, giving it a real rigorous test. So I did that for years. I did mindfulness for years. I did Zen. And then this really resonated. I did this, and as soon as I did sky breath meditation, I thought, this is that experience that I've been looking for. And so then I just really stuck with that, and that's what I've been doing consistently for the last 17 years, and also teaching and sharing with others.
Absolutely, man. As you just said, it's such a process, right? We have to trust that process and kind of experiment with different things and see what works for us. And once we find that thing, man, and you stick with it, you're going to definitely see results in your life.
And that's the funny balance, right? Because if you just do one thing and only do that from the very get-go, you may not get exposure and land on some really useful tools. On the other side, if you keep experimenting and don't stick with one thing eventually, then we don't go so deep. So it's a balance, like riding a bicycle, doing both.
Yeah, I mean, we try some things and, oh, this doesn't work for me, so that's it, right? But there's so many different techniques we can get into, right? And that's the fun of it, right? It's a process.
I'm curious for you, like what was one of the big things where you did it and it just clicked for you?
When I did it right away, so many different things, honestly, but something that comes to mind right now is being purpose driven, right? It's something that I've always kind of had in a sense, and I kind of build the foundation of my life off of that, just being mission oriented, being purpose driven. And once you know who you are, what you want, your standards, you kind of filter your life through that, right? So you kind of attract the things in your life that you do want, and you kind of repel the things that you don't.
100%.
Yeah. So when it comes to meditation, I'm curious, like, one of the benefits that we start to see once we start meditating in our own lives?
It's really interesting. There's a lot of science around it. So one, you can take the scientific angle and really see in the measurements what's actually changing in our physiology, which I find fascinating. When we look at it that way, we see, for example, a 60% drop in cortisol levels after a few months or weeks of practicing sky. And that, on the layman's terms, that means feeling less day-to-day stress. So we still have our purpose, we still have all our activities, but there's a little less of that hyped up stress sitting in the system in the background. Another big one for a lot of people is sleep. I met one man who said through this, he's been able to get off sleep medications. And for some people, it doesn't sound like a big thing. For him, it was huge. He was a veteran, he had PTSD, and so to be able to go from not sleeping without a bunch of pills to be able to sleep again is huge. For me, I think the main things on a qualitative level, just quality of life. I feel more at ease, I feel more relaxed, and that allows me in turn to do more. Because so much of the time it's the overwhelm that can stop us from living our purpose, from doing all the things we want to do. And when we dissipate that overwhelm, it just opens up so much more. If I'm relaxed, I can do more, I feel happier about it, and the whole day just goes more smoothly.
Definitely, man. There's so much data as well. Like as you mentioned, like definitely a reduction in cortisol, which is our number one stress hormone, and like there's so many different tactics, right? And out of curiosity, like what are some misconceptions that you see when it comes to meditation? Because I feel like this is changing a little bit. Like I feel like it's almost becoming cool in a sense, right? Like more people are starting to meditate, and I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
100%, which I love as well. I love that it's getting cool. I think it's the way it should be. A little before we were talking about mental fitness. So this idea that we also take care of our minds, emotions, it's great. I teach these courses in North Carolina at the retreat center often, and I'll ask how many people have meditated before. And more hands go up in the room at the start of that course. I've seen that, say, last year compared with 10 years ago, much more people walk in having tried meditation. So I think it's great that, yes, meditation is starting to be a cool thing, and it's really helpful for us.
Yeah. So like, if people are kind of
Sorry. Oh, go ahead.
if people are maybe kind of hesitant to start, like what are some things that could be blocking them in order to start this practice?
Yeah. So one of the big blocks or misconceptions, one is I can't do this. And I get this a lot from people who are nervous. They think, oh, my mind chatters so much. Meditation sounds good, but I can't sit still. I can't keep my mind quiet. So there's almost this feeling of needing to perform or everywhere to get it right. And one of the big things about meditation is just relax. And that's what I love. People walk in with this block or this misconception. It's putting people at ease. This is one place where you don't have to get it perfect. You don't have to get it right from the start. Because it's the opposite of achieving and trying to be perfect in other areas. It's saying, okay, let me give conscious rest to my mind, to my body. Let me take a few minutes for me. The other big block or misconception, I'm too busy. I've got too much going on. How can I sit still? I've got this and this. We have this imaginary list to do, right? Many of them are valid things. But by not taking that time for ourselves, we feel more stressed. We feel more worn out. So just flipping that dynamic, realizing, okay, if I rest for 20 minutes, 15 minutes, life is just so much more easy. I can also get that stuff done. It's like a yes and the best of both worlds.
Absolutely. So it sounds like it's almost had this perfection mindset. If I can't quiet my mind, oh, this is just not for me.
I met this one lady, and that was her comment. I carry so much chatter, I don't think I can do this. But by the end of learning a practice, like a specific practice, she was able to walk out and feel confident in being able to let the thoughts rest, let the mind rest. So it really is possible for everyone with a little instruction.
Definitely. So how do we begin to start this practice if we're interested? And like, if you're a beginner, where do we start?
Now we're so fortunate, right? The apps, we have YouTube. It's so easy to get started. And so one thing I recommend is YouTube. Gurudev's channel has a lot of guided meditations. Those are a really nice place to start. There's a great app called Sattva where we've put a lot of meditations on there. So it's a really low barrier to entry. You can literally be meditating within minutes, right? You pull up YouTube, you pull up this app. For sustainable practice, I found my experience it's best to put aside a few days, a few hours to get some feedback on your practice, learn with a teacher, And that way you develop an independent way that you can do it on your own for life. So between those two, it's really, you're set.
Absolutely. And it's definitely a skill, man. Like, I've been meditating for over 10 years now.
Yeah.
And, you get better as you go. You kind of learn different practices. And you may experiment with different things, as you mentioned, and see what works for us. And it may change based on the season of your life, right? And just giving yourself permission to try out these different things and move forward in a sense.
100%. And I've really found that the complete experience does morph with the seasons of your life. It's an interesting point you brought up. There are some times where getting some physical activity, getting a run in or, playing some sports before the meditation makes meditation so much easier. Other times in my life, like winter right now, it's easy to just sit and meditate, right? It's already very calm and quiet outside. So, things do build up and make a complete practice for us.
Absolutely. So there's like synergistic practices that kind of can potentially make it even more effective.
And that's one thing we were getting into a little earlier, breathwork, for example, right? A lot of people try and dive in and just close their eyes, let me meditate, let me quiet the thoughts, let me get them out. And it doesn't always work right away. But some of these synergistic practices and exercises make meditation that much more easy. Physical activity is one. Breathwork is a huge one. I never heard of breathwork for the first 4 or 5 years I was meditating. Then I tried it, I was blown away. Oh, changing the rhythms of my breath, how I can breathe, can put my mind at ease, can make my body calm. That was wild. I was blown away. I'm a big believer in that.
100%, man. Is there a difference between meditation and mindfulness?
I would say yes. One I think one recommendation is that we put aside some time to let the mind be at ease, to totally relax our nervous system, and we're not making a conscious effort. That's the key distinction. Sometimes in mindfulness, there's a concept or misconception that we need to be mindful of something, mindful of this, of that. And that can actually, at a subtle level, cause some strain in the system, some tension, because we're still making an effort at the level of the mind. Meditation, complete relaxation, giving ourselves the permission, with just the minimal effort possible to relax and restore and go into conscious rest. So that's how I would distinguish the two. Mindfulness, we're mindful of something. Meditation is complete rest, but the result is more natural mindfulness in day-to-day life. So
Got
when
it.
we're washing the dishes, when we're going on that walk, naturally, as an effect, we're more aware of what's around us.
Absolutely. So, kind of the purpose of meditation is to be more mindful during the day, right? To be more present, to be able to kind of handle stress better. Is that right?
It's a huge side effect. Yes, the more consistently we develop a meditation practice, all that you said, going back to the stress hormone, that drops. And as a result, we have more energy, the mind is more free. So as a result of meditation, yes, we feel more mindful and more joyful, I found. It's easier to appreciate all the blessings that life has to offer.
100%, man. Out of curiosity, like for people who have been meditating for a while and they've been doing this, is there any like advanced techniques that you teach? Or
Yeah.
is there anything that you want to get to in terms of that?
It's interesting. It's a really great question. And this is a bit of the downside of the YouTube era that we find ourselves in, right? Where sometimes when everything is available, that can also be overwhelming. If everything is available on YouTube, where do I start? And so that's where it really is useful to have a structured, progression. So we find that breathwork, amazing place to start. It prepares the physiology, then it's easier to go into meditation. Once you've been meditating, have that foundation, then going into more advanced stuff going forward can really build on that. So for example, chakra meditations. chakras are really popular right now, everywhere in the yoga community. Sometimes just analyzing it intellectually, that experience isn't so fulfilling. But if you have this basis, this foundation, well, there's already this silence in the mind. And then, you go into silence for a bit, even a weekend, and then you do meditations like with the chakras. It becomes an experience. It's very fulfilling. It's not just a concept. But having that foundation, we turn concepts into experience, and that's super rewarding.
Concepts into experience. I like that, man.
Yeah. Well, that was also the case for me. I read all these books, and I was going through, the original like Buddhist classics and translated from Tibetan and Sanskrit, and I had so many concepts in my mind, right? But they were concepts. My experience was not so deep those first couple of years.
Yeah.
So that I think you cannot underestimate the importance of get an actual experience. Like that's where the juice is.
100%. Yeah. Knowledge is not power. Knowledge applied is power and wisdom.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
When it comes to presence, like, because there's a lot of mindfulness meditations that just kind of like have you focus in on your senses, being present. And like when people ask me, I think that's a great place to start. Like, what's your take on like just being mindful and present during the meditation?
I think it's really grounding in a moment. So, for example, if we are in a stressful situation, bringing that awareness back to our body, bringing that awareness to our breath, all that has a place, and definitely not trying to, discard that or disregard it. And just distinguishing, like, okay, let's do these things that help ground us, but then there's also time to drop the effort and let go. So they really work hand in hand.
Yeah. Letting go is key. Like, just like not judging your thoughts, because of course things are going to come up, right? But just being able to be that witness of them, right? Being able to observe them.
And that's so key, right? It's such a beautiful experience, one, to observe the thoughts without constantly getting engaged or entangled or, swept away by them.
Yeah.
And that, with more practice, that comes more naturally.
Is there a
My
certain
friend
time
and-
frame that you recommend doing the practice? Or is it kind of dependent on what you do?
The best times I found around sunrise and sunset. It's a really beautiful time when nature's already in transition, right? So there's a bit of a natural harmony in the environment. And, taking that as a base, it can really just set a nice setting for your meditation practice. Sometimes we're still working when it's sunset, right? Or, here in the US, it can be sunrise very early sometimes, very late sometimes. Main thing is just on an empty stomach. I try and get it in first thing in the day before those phone calls start coming in, before the messages start coming in. So reserve a bit of space for yourself, for your own peace of mind, your own mental fitness. Makes a huge difference. And then in the evening again, it's like a shower for the mind. How do we wash off all the things that have accumulated during the day, the stresses, the duties, the pressures? One key way to wash those off and feel free and light is a little meditation in the evening as well.
I like that, man. Mental hygiene.
Mental hygiene, right? I mean, we brush our teeth, right? We shower, but what do we do for our mind? So exactly, mental
Yeah,
hygiene.
because we have these thoughts and experiences that build up throughout the day. And if we're not present, mindful, like, we're just kind of backed up in a sense. Like
We're collecting.
Yeah,
Imagine
just
you
like
have this
focus on what
trash
matters.
can, you just keep throwing stuff in it, but you don't take it out. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say give ourselves a space to think as well, because we're carrying on so many beliefs and experiences, whatever it may be, and it's not really serving us anymore until we start to shine the light of awareness on that and actually kind of go from there and actually look within and see what we actually want. Like, that's where it's at. Like, that's where you find your inner power.
And that's such a key question, right? What do I really want? Why am I here? What's my purpose?
Yeah.
And it's something that no one else can give to us. But I mean, you're right, putting some energy into asking those questions can make such a big difference just going forward.
Yeah, because we're so filled with these distractions, and we can't really see our purpose and things like that if we're just kind of not giving ourselves a space to actually look what is real in our own lives.
And you're right, the distractions are both internal and external. We all have these phones now, the devices, so many browsers open on our computer, and then the day-to-day pressures and stresses. So clearing all of that out of the way for a few minutes so that we can sit with a clear mind and giving ourselves space to think is so valuable.
Absolutely, man. So personally, like meditating for me, I just find that you start to cultivate this level of resilience, right? Because whatever it may be during the day, you just kind of you had this more sense of equanimity, right? You're being able to be calm under chaos because you have that center within yourself, being able to be centered under pressure. You want to speak to that at all?
It's a great question and thought. What is resilience? It's a word that gets bandied around a lot these days. But even just considering, okay, there's this quality of mind. I like to think of it almost like a tree, where with the wind, I got some nice trees outside right now, we might get swayed a little, but that ability to stand upright and keep growing, keep expanding, keep flourishing. That's how I would think about resilience. Versus either getting knocked around too much, where we lose our center, we lose our direction, or on the other side, being so rigid that we snap when the going gets tough. So all these practices develop this quality of mind where we're energized, we're loose, we're free, but also maintain and keep our consistent direction, where we want to go in life.
So it sounds like living more in alignment, right?
More in alignment, exactly, and doing these regular check-ins. Why am I here? What's my purpose? And then having these practices to support and give you that base to keep following that inner direction.
I love that because what you focus on tends to expand, right? And as long as you keep asking these empowering questions and focusing on your purpose, you strengthen that within your mind and you just become more a purpose-driven individual.
It's a great point. So often our mind does detour into not useful questions. Why is this happening to me? How come this person said that? And these negative worries can lower our energy. But if we flip that and, like you said, what we focus on expands. If we can put the focus on the good in life, on what we want to move forward, on constructive ideas, it makes such a difference.
Absolutely. Like when we start to become aware of these spaces throughout our day, and if we're thinking any negative thoughts, just being able to retrain our minds, right? To focus on what is empowering. And meditation, I mean, that's such a powerful tool for that because we can be more aware of these things and transmute them in a sense.
That's it, right? Training the mind. That's such a lost concept. In books, in school, it's all about memorizing information. But where do we step back and say, okay, how do I train my mind? How do I handle my emotions? And that's where these concepts, these practices are so useful.
Yeah, train your mind for empowerment. Right?
Yes, for empowerment.
Yeah, man. And our education is within our power, right? We can kind of steer that ship any way that we want to. Like we choose that direction. And I feel like knowing who we are is like a foundation of that. We just filter things through that in a sense.
Yeah. The more we have clarity and know our purpose, the more it's easier to weed out all the other distractions popping up on our screens and keep moving forward ahead, focused and composed.
100%, man. So you also mentioned breath work. So I would love for you to speak to the power of that and some benefits we can receive when we start doing that practice.
I think one practice that we share in common, which would 100% recommend to anyone, is alternate nostril breathing. So that's one example where it's a breathing practice, and through a couple of minutes of practice, you start to get an experience of, I don't want to create expectations, but I really invite people to experience it for themselves, but the mind starts to calm down. The mind starts to harmonize. So it's a big benefit of breathwork. It has many things. One, some breathwork practices are energizing. They help us feel more awake, more alive, more filled with energy. Other breathwork practices are calming. They can help us focus. But it's this hidden art of taking something that's everywhere, the breath. We're breathing from the day we born till the day we pass on. Taking this and tapping into it, this hidden source of power, of focus, of calm, and rekindling that within ourselves. It's so close to us, but oftentimes it's overlooked. When's the last time that we looked at our breath?
Absolutely. And just being able to breathe mindfully throughout the day, just kind of retrain our breath. It's like the number one access to our nervous system and how we can kind of control our stress response. So definitely very powerful.
Yeah, it's a great point. I was leading a class the other weekend, and we do this process where we look at, one, how fully are we using our breath? When we just observe what we're already doing, do we find our breath is shallow? Do you find your breath is deep? And then once we have that awareness, we're mindful, we're aware of that, then we can find some practice where we start to work with that and open that up even more so that we're using more of that capacity, both to release toxins, but also to breathe in more energy and clarity.
Definitely, man. So if people want to start breath work, like where do we begin with that in terms of that process?
Two options. One, I got together with some friends. We actually created an online breathwork journey experience. That's a really nice introduction. It's with a friend, Julia, and over 4 or 5 days, you get to sample different breathwork practices and experience the power for yourself. So again, we go from concept to experience and feel a bit of that calm, a bit of that relaxation. Other step for people that really want to go in deep, I really recommend like the Art of Living course where you learn sky breath meditation. And that's where you can go one-on-one with an instructor, get some feedback, do it together, like in real time, right? Like nothing substitutes for real connection. And in a couple of days, you learn a full breathwork morning routine that you can take with you for life. That's what I found to be the most fulfilling, is just to set aside a couple of hours for a few days and go in deep with someone that's learned how to do it and is sharing it with others.
I love it, man. Do you have any specific go-tos when it comes to breath? Like, do you have any things that you do or any favorites?
Yeah, one I was doing right before the session actually is called Bhastrika in Sanskrit, or bellows breath. And it's like a vigorous inhalation and then exhalation where we also use the arms to expand the chest, expand the thoracic region so we bring in more breath and we also let out some of the old stuff that's accumulated. Bhastrika is one of my go-tos for everyday use. It's also a nice one you can fit in a couple of minutes before a meeting or early in the morning to wake you up for your day.
Awesome. Is
How
that
about
kind
you?
of like
Do you have a favorite that you go to?
yeah, like I do the alternate nostril breathing, as you mentioned. I do carbon dioxide retention, which is like basically training you not to overbreathe, which a lot of us do. And then box breathing, which is probably my favorite. It's like 4 in, 4 count hold, 4 count out, 4 count hold. And it's just such an amazing stress tool used by like special forces and things like that. So
Yeah. It's some of that breath retention with the right rhythms and counts can be so powerful for really grounding and calming and releasing stress.
yeah. Is that one technique kind of like the breath of fire in a sense?
The main one we do is called Sudarshan Kriya, or sky breath meditation. And that one's really interesting because we start to use the rhythms of breath. So often, and maybe you've seen this, but the breath can get constricted. We might feel tight or we're not using our full capacity. Sometimes difficult experiences, stress, illness can gradually over time, tighten or compress the physiology. So using rhythms of breath, we can restore some of that natural elasticity and energy and let go of a lot of the stress. So that's my real go-to.
100%. Is there a proper way to be breathing throughout the day? Because I feel like a lot of us were not breathing correctly, and it's causing this unconscious stress that we don't even really understand.
It is. It is. One of the big ones is, it's one thing I've been thinking about recently. In our culture, we put so much attention on how we look and our image and, the Instagram friendly, the physique, all of that. And I was just thinking, what if we shifted that to how we feel? Do we feel at ease? Do we feel light in the body? And a lot of that comes back to the breath. Are we holding our breath or are we breathing freely? So even just that shift, okay, can I bring my attention back to my breath? Can I relax my body and switch into fuller, expanded breathing? Can make a nice little shift. So that's one thing I would say is just shifting the focus from appearance to ease in the body and the mind is itself a really useful shift.
Very interesting, yeah. To my understanding, like the nose is really what we're supposed to be breathing out of, right? But a lot of us are mouth breathers. I mean, if we just look at the structure of the nose, it's really designed to kind of filter out all of these pollutants in the air. It produces nitric oxide, and our mouth doesn't have any of that. So
Yeah.
to my understanding.
Yeah, it's a great natural observation. You're right on.
Yeah, and it's also you get a lot deeper in the lungs, right? As opposed to the mouth where you just kind of like it's a lot of shallowness.
And sometimes people feel like they're almost gasping for air at a very subtle level. Just when we breathe through the nose, there's a lot more clear passage. Granted, if you're sick, sometimes when the nose is blocked up, we adjust. It happens naturally. But as much as possible, breathing through the nose is a bit more comfortable and helpful.
Yeah. And what about diaphragmatic breathing? Like, should our belly expand? Like, what are your thoughts?
That's where it gets interesting, right? Have you observed how a baby breathes? Like when you look at a little infant, and it's like you're saying, it's big belly diaphragmatic breathing. Their whole body expands. And then when they breathe out, what happens? You see the exhale, right? So often that gets lost over time. So that's one of the practices that we learn is how to naturally start expanding that so that we use more of, the full body in the lower area and the upper lobes and we really expand that use and flow of the breath. 100%.
Got it. So when we're breathing, like our belly should expand a little bit and kind of relax as we go down. Is that right?
Exactly. And it's also restoring the natural movement of our body. At some point, we make an effort to do it, but really what's the most productive is releasing the stresses that have set this into auto mode, right?
Yeah.
We're not breathing shallow because we want to, but it's just an auto response at a certain point. The more we release the stress, then naturally it opens up, but hand in hand with what you're saying, doing some practices that open up the belly, open up the chest on the inhale, and also ensure a more full exhale and decompression.
100%. Did you do any type of moving meditations?
A little bit. We talked a little about morning routines a little earlier before the call, and one of my morning routines is I'll do a walk, and sometimes I'll do a little chanting in the mind if some thoughts come up, just to keep the awareness with what I'm doing. And for me, that's a bit of a moving meditation, if you will. But then for the full meditation, it's just sitting still, letting everything relax and doing nothing, if you will.
Yeah. Just walking qigong. I do that.
Qigong is great, right? Some yoga, some tai chi, all those can really help.
Yeah, as I mentioned like before, like the synergy within these things. And something I've been contemplating lately is like it's not just about habits. It's about sub habits that make things work together, right? So if you do maybe nothing else but meditate, yeah, you're gonna get benefits. But maybe if you take a walk, you actually start to journal, whatever it is, to kind of be more mindful, like these things work together to make them more effective.
100%. And going back to your earlier thought, that's another misconception is I can't meditate because I have too many thoughts. And I tried to sit down and close my eyes, but it didn't work. When we combine habits, though, and we do some exercise, some yoga beforehand, we find that meditation becomes that much easier. So oftentimes it is this habit stacking. Combining a bit of movement with a bit of stillness really can be a magic formula for a lot of people.
100%. Stacking the conditions in your favor, right? For success.
Yeah. Not trying to start meditating outside at a bus stop or, next to a noisy environment for sure.
We just make things like really difficult, right? Kind of do the opposite sometimes and kind of make it easier to fail. And
Right?
once we start to kind of like have a North Star in our life in a sense, we kind of make it meaningful, right? Make your life
And that's
meaningful. Be
right.
present in whatever it is that you do.
And that's sometimes, like you said, setting the conditions in our favor. I remember one example I saw where you take a big glass jar, and if you put a lot of sand in it, but you also want to put some like tennis balls in it, they won't all fit. But if you take that big glass jar and put the tennis balls in first and then put the sand in, it all fits. And so it's a lot about setting those priorities, those conditions. And sometimes we fill our life with so many things, and some are valid, like all the calls and all the appointments and responsibilities. Some we can't do anything about, but when we put in a little mental fitness, some silence, some self-care as the foundation, then it all happens to work out in a much more structured way. But if we say, oh, I'll get around to meditation, I'll get around to self-care when I get through all this.
Yeah.
Does getting through all this ever finish? No, there's always another thing.
Yeah. A lot of times, man, like I find the only effort I need to make is to make no effort. Let your training take over. Let your mastery take over, right? Because if we're just in the moment, that's where your expertise actually comes out and you're actually able to stay focused and be in the flow, right? As opposed to like being in our head, it just makes things much different, right? So just kind of let your training take over and master the moment.
That's so well put. It's one thing my teacher keeps reminding me is that this journey is from the head to the heart. And a lot of these things help us to make that journey.
Yeah.
We've heard, okay, we want to be less in our heads sometimes, but how do we do that, right? That's where all this fits in.
Yeah. Just learning how to be more still, right? Just enter that stillness. And from there, you just like, that's where real power is. Like when we're kind of centered and just being aware of what we want. And, yeah, man.
Going for it.
Yeah. I know you had mentioned morning routines a little bit. What is your morning routine? And actually, how do we start one? Because how we start a day is really kind of going to start the trajectory of how we end it in a sense, and the empowerment that we take and the paths and decisions and all that. So
It's a great question. It's a timely one. We're a few weeks out from January, and it's a time when lots of people think about creating new habits, starting new habits. Suddenly the inspiration it's like a wave, it hits everyone. We're actually doing a dry January challenge, a New Year reset, which I'm really excited about. We'll be walking people through that online. And we'll be talking about how do you form new habits. It's interesting because one thing we look at is it's two-edged. The way you drop a habit that doesn't serve you is also the way that you can start a new habit that does serve you. And when you combine both of those, it's really powerful. One thing we say is start small. Make a commitment. I'm going to start meditating for 3 days, for 7 days, and then stretch it out. Sometimes we say, okay, this is the last day I'm smoking ever, or I'm never going to drink again, XYZ. And what happens when we say never? It's easy for it to just fall off, right? But when we take a manageable commitment, okay, 1 week, and then we stretch out to, okay, 1 month. Oh, I did it. Okay, 3 months. That's an amazing way to start a new habit. Second thing is accountability. Find a friend or join a community, a support group, and share your intention. When you share it, when you write it down on paper, you put a date, you put your intention, it becomes that much more real, and you're actually much more likely to achieve your goal. So those are two things that I found very practical, very doable, and increase the success multifold.
I love it, man. Yeah. As you mentioned, like, it's that time of year, but man, another thing is like we got to stop with these resolutions, and we need to become resolute within ourselves
Oh, love that.
because we on all these things, but we haven't made an internal decision that this is going to happen. This is going to be my life, right? So it just falls
Right.
off. But until we actually make that conviction within ourselves, like it doesn't really matter.
Right? Like that strength, that boldness behind that intention does move the needle.
Yeah, I mean that's where it all starts because all these habits, like it's not easy a lot of times. Like if we want to change our lives and we're kind of like not in a situation that we want to be. A lot of times, like success is something you attract by the person that you become. Like you need to forge your character through these challenges, and essentially, you need to actually walk that path and understand it's not going to be perfect. It's about progress and just taking that progressive action every single day, right? And just keeping a North Star in mind.
Yeah, and you brought up an interesting point. It's not always easy. Why do we call it habits? You know, at, why don't we just say things that we do? It implies it's ingrained in us in a certain way, for better or for worse. If I have a habit of staying up late every night, it's not because I necessarily think that's good for me, but sometimes there's a bit of auto drive that kicks in, and that's where the magic is creating new habits sustainably, so that we can let go of these things that are not life supporting, but in a way that works, so that we, like to your point, we become resolute and keep progressing forward.
Yeah, because if we start adding all these positive things in our life, as you kind of mentioned, it's like all these negative things, they kind of just fall off. You don't really have a want or a need for them anymore.
And that's another trick or misconception that is hard for people, because sometimes people get lost in struggling with the negative, struggling with the worry. Why is it like this? It shouldn't be like this. Getting down ourselves. Why am I like this? Why do I keep doing this? And like you said, when we increase the positive, when we bring more clarity, more light, more energy in, this stuff stops to drop away without our mind being in a struggle with itself. That's really important, I would say, is don't struggle with yourself, but increase the energy. Get the breath, get the positive energy flowing.
Absolutely, because I noticed like once you start doing these things, like even just getting sunlight, eating well, meditating, like when you increase that level of energy and you give your mind and body the energy it actually needs to process anything in our lives, it just makes things flow, right? Because if we're stuck in this low energy state, in a sense, it's going to make it much easier to go for that negative thing, right? Because that's what we know in a sense. So that's kind of what we do. So it's that bridging the gap to a higher level of being that is so possible for us.
Right? Bridging the gap. There's so much possible. We have so much potential. How do we get there? And then taking those steps, one step at a time.
Yeah, man, we have infinite potential for real, and it's like once we actually start to see what is possible, it's kind of like, oh, this is how things can be, right? And it's just kind of like have this internal fire, this motivation of like, oh, what's possible, right? How can I grow? How can I serve?
And it opens up this beautiful question. What do I want to do with this one human life that I have right now? And so often, if we're just lost in the fog of doing this and that and all that, we lose that opportunity.
Yeah, and just like changing our thoughts, like I feel like it's the least that we can do. Just not dwell in the negative, right? Just don't even worry about the actions that you need to take. Just be at a state of neutrality, right? At the least, just kind of like focus on what is real and what isn't. And a lot of times we tend to fear what we don't understand. Like we kind of like stay in this negative loop. And a lot of times, man, if we just kind of like move beyond that, we're just gonna know it's not even real.
And that's one thing we go into in the courses and the things is how to reverse that tendency of the mind. Oftentimes we focus on the negative. We might get 10 compliments and we get one argument or insult, what does the mind hang on to? The negative, right? And so learning the skills to reverse that and focus on all the positive that is there in our life. It's such an essential skill to have.
Absolutely. And when you become more mission oriented, you just kind of like know what is important and what isn't, right? Because you kind of like you do your best that you can and you learn from the situation and you just move forward. Like you know that it's kind of part of the process. Challenges are part of the issue. And it's like the obstacle is the way in a sense.
And that's a beautiful discovery when we can start to shift from obstacle to, okay, let me embrace this challenge. And more than that, let me have a little fun with it. Otherwise, some obstacle or another is going to block our happiness.
Yeah. Like embrace that challenge and understand, like use it as training. Like use this thing in your day as training because you can either get better from it or you can kind of like push it to the side but I'd rather like train my mind in a sense, right? Use this to your advantage.
Yeah. And it's so nice then because you can look back and reflect, okay, 1 year ago, before I started on this path, on this practice, where was I? Okay, 2 years ago, and seeing, okay, you really can. It's realistic, it's practical to change your energy, change your mind, and go forward in a new direction, 100%.
Yeah, it's almost like things are happening for you, right? Not to you.
Yeah. We had this funny experience the other day where we were driving to an event, a meditation event, and my friend who was doing the directions spaced out a little and didn't get us off the interstate at the right time. So we've passed by most of the city, and so then we said, okay, just turn off here. Next exit, let's turn off. As we're turning off, my other friend who was driving said, oh, I think this is where my cousin lives. And this is a cousin he hasn't seen in years. He's very close to his mom. And I said, oh, why don't you call her? We can stop. You can say hello. We ended up, pulling over. They connected. She came out and met him. They reconnected in this parking lot by this grocery store in this middle of nowhere town. But it was such a serendipity. And she was so happy and grateful. She's crying. She gets to see him again. And it was a situation where, okay, this could have been an annoyance or botheration. Or, hey, this was this challenge and a joyful detour that life took us on. So it really just is the perspective and framing.
Yeah, the serendipities start to happen and we start to live more in alignment for sure.
Yeah.
All right, man, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story with us, all your insights, because as we mentioned, like meditation, such a powerful tool we can utilize in our own lives. And once we start to develop that skill of breath work, meditation, all these synergistic practices, we just become more effective in our lives, being able to be more at peace and live with joy and be on purpose, man. So I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, great being on with you, Anthony, and we had a great discussion.
Yeah, so if people want to get connected with you and your work, where can we find you?
Yep, you can find me on Instagram at andrew.keaveney. That's ANDREW.KEAVENEY. And you can learn more about our programs at artofliving.org.
All right, man. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Anthony.